The objective of this section is to learn operational security, known as OPSEC, which is the actions and behaviors required in order to maintain security and anonymity. It is to avoid human errors. In this section, you will learn a level of OPSEC suitable to protect you against well-resourced adversaries with global influence, such as a nation state. This level of OPSEC will not be required for most people watching this course, though. But understanding operational security is fundamental to understanding how people truly maintain anonymity online. So that's why we go into this level of detail in this section of OPSEC. In this section, I'm going to teach you about OPSEC, or operational security. This refers to the habits and behaviors you perform to enforce good security. This is probably the most underrated security control, and if done poorly, is the most likely to destroy your security, privacy, and anonymity. So let's again define privacy, anonymity, and pseudo-anonymity again. So privacy is nobody seeing what you do, but potentially knowing who you are. Privacy is about content. Privacy is about maintaining confidentiality and keeping secrets. Anonymity is nobody knowing who you are, but potentially seeing what you do. Anonymity is keeping your actions and activities separate from your true identity. Anonymity concerns your identity. Anonymity is when, out of a set of all possible people, there is an equal chance it could be anyone. You may desire this for viewing content, but not for making it. It depends. Anonymity means non-attribution to your actions, to be nameless, to be faceless. And finally, pseudo-anonymity is when you wish to retain a reputation against an identity. A common example is having an alias for social media or for a forum online. And this picture sums it up. An adversary may not know who the blue bag user is, but they can attribute posts and activities to him or her. This is an alias, a cover, a false identity. This section is aimed more for those who want anonymity and non-attribution to their actions. OPSEC is as important as your adversary is well-resourced and the consequences of your actions are high. If non-attribution really matters, then OPSEC must not be skipped. If your adversary is a law enforcement agency or nation state, this section is particularly relevant to you. This section is aimed at freedom fighters, journalists, whistleblowers, the repressed, and others without justice needing serious privacy and non-attribution. So here's a quote from the Wall Street Journal from a gentleman called James Kilpatrick, one of the HSI agents who is or was part of Operation Roundtree. This emphasizes the need for OPSEC. This is what he said. There's not a magic way to trace people. He's talking in this example through Tor, but it applies generally to attribution online. So we typically capitalize on human error, looking for whatever clues people leave in their wake. Capitalize on human error. Another quote for you. Most people don't have the discipline to not make a mistake. Kilpatrick continues, the average person is too worried about doing their business to never make a mistake. Waiting for mistakes is part of good old-fashioned standard police work. Law enforcement investigations traditionally rely on people making mistakes, basic OPSEC failures. It's not about decrypting your encryption or finding you through tunnels of anonymity. It's about basic OPSEC failures. That's what's more likely to get you. People are usually caught because of activities they performed in the early stages that were non-anonymous and tie back to their real identity, not realizing the internet never forgets and you are being watched. Sound OPSEC is required from the beginning to counter any serious adversary. Many people have at least two identities online, one professional, one personal, and there is often associated separate security domains for these, i.e. personal laptop, personal email, personal accounts, etc. And then you have a professional laptop, professional email, and accounts. But the line is blurring those two identities with things like bring your own device, accessing work via your own laptop and mobile, using a business laptop for personal use, social media with work and personal contacts mixed, and more of our lives being a part of the internet. Consider the risks associated with what you do online. Could an unfortunate post on social media affect your career? Could simply liking a post cause you problems? Are you put off liking posts because of how some people may react? What are the consequences of posting, viewing, or creating the sort of content online that you wish to do freely? How might your personal opinions affect your career? Do you want to mix colleagues with friends and family online? Do you have distinctly private activities that you don't want associated with your real identity? Do you perform activities that law enforcement agencies or nation states have laws against? In order to successfully manage your privacy, anonymity, and pseudo-anonymity online, you need an identity strategy to deal with those sorts of things. I see there being 6 main strategies that I can think of for dealing with contextual identities online. You might find that you already have an identity strategy, but never really thought too much about the detail of how you're implementing it. Let's see if you're implementing any of these. So first is the open strategy. This is using your real identity and being transparent and authentic. Some people live their real lives in the public eye. This is suitable for certain situations and cultures. This is obviously risky and can make you vulnerable. Your circumstances will determine if this is viable. This means you still want security, but not for privacy and anonymity. And even if you have an open strategy, you can restrict the amount of personal information that you give out for security reasons. The next possible strategy is avoidance. Avoiding using certain social media, not posting, or even not viewing certain content. This is often unrealistic and deprives you from the advantage of the internet. A common example might be not using or having social media accounts, or not posting, or not even viewing certain content at all. Many of my security colleagues use the avoidance strategy and simply have no online presence at all, apart from an email address. Security professionals tend to be the most paranoid of people. And then there's the audience strategy. Separate audiences for different aliases and content. For example, keeping your personal and professional networks separate by using Facebook for friends and family and LinkedIn for your professional network. That's an audience strategy. The audience strategy is risky because even though you're restricting your content to a certain audience, there isn't always a mechanism for that audience not to forward on the content that you may have produced. So for example, people from your Facebook account could forward information to people on your LinkedIn account. You can have a content strategy, only posting, viewing, and creating carefully considered content. With this strategy, you are forced to create content that matches a consistent appearance to all people and that is in line with what you believe is acceptable. This is for all people like friends, family, colleagues, government, your adversary. You are forced to be unauthentic. This strategy is risky as you could still inadvertently cause unintended consequences anyway. There's a compartmentalization strategy using one or more contextually separate identities from your real identity. So like a John Smith on Facebook, a John Doe on a forum, your real name on LinkedIn. For anonymity and pseudo-anonymity online, compartmentalization between identities is obviously required. And the final strategy is a custom strategy. The best general strategy for most people will be a custom strategy of avoidance, audience, content, and compartmentalization. When content is custom to the audience, there is less risk. When identity is custom to the content, there is less risk. Some examples. For avoidance, you might not post on Reddit political views. For audience, keep professional contacts on LinkedIn. For content, you have a friends list and a family list on Facebook. For compartmentalization in relation to your politics, you post on a political forum under a different identity. You search, write emails, download files, all under a different identity using a separate security domain implemented through a VPN, virtual machines, and management of your browser data leaks, making layers of compartmentalization and isolation. The custom strategy is a mix of all strategies in order to create a suitable solution for each situation. You should choose and implement an effective strategy for your situation if you need privacy, anonymity, and pseudo-anonymity online. Remember, the internet doesn't forget, and nation-states are scooping up and maintaining your internet traffic en masse. This can be used against you in future depending on what your actions have been and what they will be. If you are sending traffic without strong ephemeral keys, nation-states could one day pull that out of their vast archives and decrypt it with the latest supercomputer. So you need an effective identity strategy to maintain your privacy, anonymity, and pseudo-anonymity online. This section is more for political dissidents, freedom fighters, journalists, whistleblowers, and those that seriously need non-attribution to their real identity. The first step in establishing effective OPSEC for maximum anonymity is to set up your environment and identities. The more serious your adversary and the consequences, the more serious you take OPSEC. You will need separate security domains per identity. If you don't know what that means, go to the section on security domains and understand that. Separate security domain per identity. Even the configuration of your browser, the browser fingerprint, can tie identities together. So you need to have separate browsers. And you achieve this through isolation. In the section on isolation and compartmentalization, we talk more about how to achieve this. So remember, your identities need isolation and compartmentalization. They need their own separate security domain so that everything technically is separate and it relates to them. The browser is different, maybe the operating system is different, the cookies are different. Consider the security controls as we go through the course as to which is appropriate for each identity. After you have security, anonymity services, and compartmentalization set up, which you will understand through going through the course, you then need to establish a cover. A cover is a character or identity who will appear to be responsible for your actions. This person takes the heat when the walls start closing in. You need your own Kaiser Soze. And if you don't understand that reference, then your homework for today is watching the movie The Usual Suspects and understand who Kaiser Soze is. You need your Kaiser Soze. Using anonymizing services, like we discussed in the section on anonymizing services, Nestor VPNs, John Donham, Tor, etc., and the security controls detailed throughout the course to stay anonymous, you need to establish the accounts you need. Establish fake Twitter, Facebook, Gmail, forum accounts, whatever accounts you need for your private and anonymous activity relating to the new alias you are establishing. Even fake photos are great. Create supporting evidence for your alias. For inspiration, you can have a look at this site here, Fake Name Generator. If you log in via a fake Google account, you can view full social security numbers, save profiles for later. You should use a secure method like LastPass or other secure identity manager to store the information on each alias profile. Now, if you look here, you can, select the gender, select the name set. Let's go with Dutch Wales and select the country. Let's go with the United Kingdom. Generate. And this should give you inspiration and an idea of the sort of information you need for a real alias. It's not just a name. Look, you're putting on a bit of weight, but that's fine. It's just your alias. And note carefully what your alias is used for and how you access it. Do you access it via VPN X using virtual machine Y? You must always use those to access that alias. Let's dig a little deeper. If you wish to always stay anonymous against a serious adversary, you need to create an entire person you can embody so you never make the mistake of referencing something personal to yourself. Establish the alias's gender, like I've shown you, location, job, hair color, height, weight, even if they have tattoos or piercings, everything. You must inhabit this character so you never provide profiling information. Just talking about the weather in your location is enough to locate you. When you're in character, become the character. Never fall out of character, which means they have to be someone that you can pull off and is believable. If your alias is Japanese and you don't speak Japanese, and you need to, that's not going to work. So research your character, research their location, the city, the profile, so you understand enough to become that alias. You have to become that alias because when that alias needs to communicate with the world, you can slip up if you're not in character. You can reveal accidentally information. So that's why you have to embody the character. You become the character. Create a bio. Define their history, background, what teams do they support? Did they go to university? Which one? Are they religious? Do they have political affiliations? What is their sexual orientation? It is possible to create what are called sub-aliases. So for example, let's imagine you are a political dissident. You might register on a forum under a username that doesn't relate to your alias, but is connected to your alias via the email. So if this forum identity is investigated, it leads only to your alias and not you. So it's a alias within an alias, a sub-alias. You could create a network of aliases to support each other's legitimacy. If they're investigated, then they only lead to fake aliases. It will take a few days to set up a basic alias and a few months to really bed one in, but it is worth it if your adversary is serious and the consequences are high. If your adversary is good, your OPSEC needs to be better. Unfortunately, setting up aliases, backgrounds, sub-aliases, this can all be a little bit boring, but it is essential for good OPSEC. Proper planning and practice prevents piss-poor performance. One mistake in timing, implementation, configuration can be enough. You can only make one mistake. And because of that, I recommend practice. If that's possible in your situation, create some fake aliases, security domains, covers, then use them for legitimate uses for a few months and evaluate your performance. How well did you do? Was there any contamination? When you can establish professional level cover without contamination is when you're ready to move. When an alias has had a significant amount of interactions and has become effective in its purpose, it is time to consider retiring it, if it's possible in your situation. The more interactions the alias has, the more risk is associated with it. You can set up monitoring for your identities to notify you of anything relating to your identities, including your real identity. But obviously remember, the alert should be sent to the right alias. There should be no cross-contamination. You can use Google Alerts to do that. Let's take a step back from the internet now and think about the real world. If the adversary that concerns you has significant means, motive and opportunity, such as a nation state, and has targeted you for whatever reason, maybe you're targeted because of the sites you visit, or you're targeted specifically, then total privacy and anonymity online requires that you are anonymous in the real world too. There's no compromise on that, unfortunately. Because of the nature of the internet and the supporting technology, which is not designed for privacy or security, you cannot guarantee total anonymity online. Even when using encryption, Tor gateways, VPNs, virtual machines, and all the security controls recommended in this course. Unless you are anonymous in the real world, then an adversary with large enough resources who is after you will track you down in time if you don't have real-world security controls. This is where we start to talk about fake offline identities, cover, aliases, backstories, and to be constantly on the move. Most people won't be in this situation, thankfully. But if this is you, then a good resource to start with is to have a look at this book, The Baby Harvester: How Virtual Babies Became the Future of Terrorist Financing and Money Laundering. Because births and deaths registration is now moving online, it's possible to digitally or online establish a new and real identity in various countries. And this book talks about how that is done and what the researcher Chris Rock found out when he tried to create new, fake, but real identities. There's also a video here, a presentation, that is Chris Rock, which is kind of a summary of his book. So if you're interested in fake real identities, it's a good place to start. Also search the dark web for fake IDs and setting up fake real life aliases. If you need to escape your nation, consider going to countries that don't have extradition treaties, which I think is pretty obvious. This information is intended for political dissidents, freedom fighters, journalists, whistleblowers, and those in need of non-attribution. If you have separate identities, you need to maintain compartmentalization and isolation between them, as you already know now. Failing to separate your identities is the number one mistake people make when attempting to establish security for anonymity. Layers of compartmentalization and isolation through security domains helps reduce contamination. There should be no contact between identities and aliases. It's your biggest risk. Identities are also referred to as covers, aliases, pseudonyms. If it matters to you, you need to check your existing identities for cross-contamination between them. Ross William Ulbricht, the alleged Dread Pirate Roberts, an operator of the original Silk Road, which was a Tor deep web hidden service, which was used as a market for the exchange of illegal goods and services, Ross had contaminated his real identity from the very beginning, so was doomed to always get caught. He had made some odd posts under his real identity relating to hidden services and Bitcoin coders, and then years later he used on Silk Road an alias that tied back to these posts. This was discoverable via a simple Google search. No complex decryption of cryptography required. This was simply identity contamination and basic OPSEC failure. If you have separate identities, spend time searching for cross-contamination between them if you want to continue using them. Start by simply Google searching and then use all the other search engines. Make sure you do this using anonymizing services too. If contamination leads back to your real identity, and there are consequences to this, you need to start damage limitations immediately and try to remove that contamination. This may not even be possible. Consider the OPSEC rules. If you have failed to maintain these and contamination exists between identities, plus the consequences are high, you may need to abandon them and cut your losses completely. Ross, for example, if finding that contamination, decided then to quit, he may have been fine because they needed the evidence of catching him in the act to convict him. You should start new identities. If the tree is already poisoned, don't keep eating the fruit. If the consequences are sufficiently high, you'll need a new real-life identity potentially. If you have a look at this link here, this can start you thinking about how you might delete some of the information that you have online. Google provides limited support for removing information. If you have a look at this link here, you can see what they'll remove. And it's things like national identification numbers, bank account numbers, credit card numbers, images of signatures, and sexually explicit images. So it's fairly limited what Google will remove. Most social media sites enable you to delete your account, but there is no guarantee that they don't keep an archive of it. In fact, it's extremely likely they will have archive backups of the database containing your information. It's fairly simple to delete your account, but if you go to this URL here, it shows you on the various different social media platforms how to delete your account. Here on Facebook and Twitter, go into your account settings and settings, security, deactivate account, etc. On Google Plus and LinkedIn as well. It also tells you to do searches for yourself online. And another reasonably good recommendation for accounts you cannot delete, then falsify the information, change the data that's in there. Unsubscribing from mailing lists, and something we go through in the area of search engines, and that's deleting your search engine search history. You can also try contacting webmasters and the people that run websites and asking them to delete the content. Data clearing houses, these may or may not be effective in removing some of your information. You might be able to get unlisted with relevant phone companies. You can also delete your email accounts and all of your emails. If you're on forums and those sorts of things, you may be able to edit your posts and delete them. You may have seen this site before. This is the Wayback Machine or archive.org. And if you do a search on here, you'll see that this site and sites like it archive the internet. And if we look here, go back to 1996, you can have a look what the BBC used to look like. And there it was, pretty basic. So you can see it really goes back in time. Let's have a look at what Microsoft looked like in 1996. October the 20th, 1996. And there you are, an archive of what Microsoft was saying back in 1996. So as you can see, there are archives. These archives can be deleted if you send an email to info@archive.org, but there are other archive sites as well, but this is the major one, and your adversary may have already recorded the information. Finally, consider what you can do legally under the right to be forgotten and research how this might apply to you. If you think it might be useful in your case, you may be able to use the law to remove information about you. Let's go through my 10 OPSEC rules. These are inspired by the awesome work of a gentleman called the Gruck, whose work I highly recommend. This is his blog here if you want to check out his work on OPSEC. So in no particular order, and some may relate to each other, these are my OPSEC rules for those who need serious anonymity and pseudo-anonymity online. Rule number 1, always keep your mouth shut. This means never revealing operational details. For example, you don't tell people you use Nesta VPNs and Tails or Tor, that you use a Debian laptop or you love iPhones. An example could be just simply messaging to your freedom fighter associate and complaining that Tor is slow. Don't do it, you're revealing operational details. Never reveal plans of what you intend to do. Remember, if you don't say it, you don't have to encrypt it, you don't have to protect it. In public places where you could be overheard or recorded, never be explicit. Use code words, also called cryptonyms. Rule number 2, trust no one. Use the zero trust model that I talk about throughout the course, i.e. assume everything and everyone cannot be trusted. Operate from this perspective by mitigating the risk through security controls and distributing trust. Information should be given out on a need-to-know basis only. The less you say to people, the better you are. The smaller group of co-conspirators, the better you are. Especially do not trust co-conspirators. Co-conspirators can be turned to work for your adversary or may be your adversary. They are not friends. Do not treat them as friends. They will become criminal co-defendants if your adversary arrests them. The less they know about you and all the operational activity, the better. People don't keep their mouths shut. People won't go to prison for you. Watch for co-conspirators who disappear and then come back, or habits change. They could have been caught and are now under the control of your adversary. And beware of people offering to buy information. This is a common law enforcement agency tactic. If possible, operate alone. Don't tell friends or family. Don't allow people to take power over you so it can be used against you. Never let anyone get in a position to blackmail you. Don't let people take control over your actions or life. Rule number 3, never contaminate identities. This means do not share anything between aliases, email addresses, accounts, friends, IP addresses, cookies, browsers, email clients, operating systems, locations, anything. You shouldn't even have the same password among identities. This is total contamination. Don't use different identities at the same time, e.g. don't post via your real identity on Facebook while logged into your freedom fighter identity in Tor via an IRC channel. This could be correlated. Don't visit sites and locations associated with other identities, i.e. don't go onto your personal Facebook account or real email while on Tor as a different identity. This can be correlated. Never log into accounts as an anonymous identity through Tor or other such anonymizing service that you have previously logged into without anonymizing. Your adversary could then associate an anonymous connection with a real IP. Don't make connections with those involved with operations relating to your other aliases whenever possible. If you're using an off-site internet connection to protect your anonymity, don't take any mobile phone associated with other identities or your real identity. This can be linked. If your adversary is of significant means and the consequences are high, don't use an internet connection at your house, your home, or location connected to your real identity. We cover more on this later in off-site connections, but otherwise always use an anonymizing service as discussed in the course. Always use aliases separated through isolation and compartmentalization in separate security domains. For example, maybe a separate laptop or virtual machine, VPN, Tor, browser configuration, etc., or storing sensitive data encrypted in the cloud. We cover all this later. One phone for one identity. Don't call contacts of one identity with the phone of another. Rule number 4, be uninteresting. This means make everything as uninteresting as possible. Fly under the radar. Don't make a fuss. Don't be outspoken. When it comes to technology, use things like steganography. Hide your knowledge and conceal your use of security controls. Avoid high-risk areas and actions. For example, don't hang around on a political forum making posts if you're a political dissident. Don't hang around on hacker forums if you're a hacker freedom fighter, if at all possible. Don't maintain accounts if at all possible, and especially in high-risk places. If you have to post on forums, keep to the business to hand and no chat about anything else. Don't pose questions if you can help it. Don't draw the attention of a well-resourced adversary whenever possible. Don't perform actions that could shine a light on you for further investigation. For example, don't get caught breaking the law by doing something silly like speeding, which results in a house search, which results in you getting sent to jail for your counter-government material discovered. Establish an average identity, a believable identity. Don't make yourself a 6'6" lesbian with red hair. A 30-year-old John the accountant is much better. Don't do anything longer than you have to. The longer you do something, the more likely it can be correlated. Rule number 5, be paranoid now instead of when you get caught. Be actively paranoid. If you have an active adversary and you know it, then they are out to catch you. You should be paranoid. Always consider all the angles. Spend time thinking about all the possible angles from your adversary's perspective. Your adversary will always try the easiest routes to catching you, so tighten up the simple things first, like patching your laptop before you worry about bouncing your traffic around the world through Tor pluggable transports and nested VPNs. Be aware at all times. Plan for things going wrong and how you will mitigate the risk when they do, if they do. Plan for a knock at the door and being arrested. Use fail-safe or fail-close technology like VPN kill switches. If something fails, it must fail in a way that continues to protect you. If you don't use them, disable or remove wireless, Bluetooth, webcams, or cover up the webcam with tape. Disable the microphone. Don't use a wireless keyboard, mouse, or monitor. If you can get away with not using all of those, don't use them. If you're talking about anything sensitive, remove the battery out of your phone or as a minimum turn it off. Switch off other electric devices such as tablets, smartphones, TVs. When using someone else's Wi-Fi or network, assume everything is logged. Maintain all the same security, privacy and anonymity security controls that you would normally. At a minimum, the IP will tie you to a physical location and time, and that could be enough to identify you. Never leave your devices unattended and the screens unlocked. Preferably store them in physically secure or hidden places. Power off your devices, especially if you're using whole disk encryption, and you should be using whole disk encryption. We cover that in its own section. If possible, against your real identity, never promote or discuss security, privacy and anonymity matters. Don't show your PGP key, mention Tor or VPNs or anything that would raise a slight flag that you're interested in these topics. Rule number 6, know your limitations. Operate at the level of your abilities. If you don't fully understand what you're doing, then either stop what you are doing until you do, or accept the risk that your lack of knowledge could get you caught. Stick with technology and processes you understand and can effectively implement. Keep it as simple as possible so not to introduce complexity that can get you caught. Physical security domains can be simpler. When things become too complex, they go wrong. For example, it can be easier to have a separate secure USB stick with tails on it than engage in complex virtualization for compartmentalization as described in this course if you just don't understand it enough. Rule number 7, minimize information. No logs equals no crime. Avoid logging anything if you can. Keep operational information that you need, but destroy everything else. Browser history, for example, is not required. So where possible, don't leave evidence. It's better to not leave it than encrypt it and leave it. If it is not needed, don't keep it, especially not tied to your real identity on your laptop, logs, browser history, etc. Minimize what people can find, even if it's fully protected. Send as little information as possible in communications. The less said, the better. You see perfect examples of this on the TV show The Sopranos. They say things like, I'll bring the thing and meet you at the place. Don't forget to tell the guy. Instead of, I'll bring the bag of drugs to Bada Bing and don't forget to tell Tony, or whatever it is they might say. It's easy for your defense later if you are vague. Don't send clear text messages. Everything should be encrypted, even if it's non-sensitive. If you only encrypt what is sensitive, then that in itself gives away that it's sensitive. Never leave anything behind that might be traced back to you. Your real identity, environment, and security domain associated with you should have no contraband and be evidence-free. And don't leave a money trail. Rule number 8, be professional. If your adversary is professional and the consequences are high for you, then you must also act equally professional. Don't be an amateur and get caught. You must treat your OPSEC, security, privacy and anonymity with the seriousness it requires. A man must know his limitations, but if you have limitations that create risk, you need to educate yourself. This course will help you do that. Take a logical and systematic approach to what you're doing. Treat it as a business. Don't make it a pursuit of pleasure. Make it a business and treat it as one. Rule number 9. Employ anti-profiling. This means avoid revealing personal information or stories about yourself, as it can be used for profiling. This includes in chat discussions, voice calls, forum posts, private messages, encrypted messages, everywhere. Even if you think these are private, they are not. Never reveal your real gender, location, jobs, hobbies, hair color, height, weight, physical attributes, where you were born, your favorite sports team, the car you drive or prefer, what tattoos you have, nothing, no personal information. Do not even include personal information in your online identity, your nickname, your username, your handle, or even a similar name. Don't even indicate your gender. Do not reveal anything that can reveal your location or time zone, like talking about location references, weather, political events, entertainment events, or by using special characters from a keyboard related to your language. Avoid keeping regular hours, as this can reveal a time zone and a geographic location if you do. If you can, don't keep regular routines, habits, or methods being consistent and unpredictable. Use misinformation to mislead. Change your time zones. Speak in a language not your own if you know one. Use alternative spellings if you can. For example, if you're from the US, use UK spellings or Australian spellings and words as part of a UK alias. Maybe add metadata to photos and documents subtly pointing to your fake identity to provide misinformation. Provide misinformation to your co-conspirators. If they ask you any question, answer as your alias. And use authorship recognition evasion methods that we'll discuss later. And the final rule, rule number 10, protect your assets. Don't send data without end-to-end encryption. Use the security controls, tools, technologies, processes highlighted in this course to enable your security, privacy, and anonymity, protecting your assets and your secrets. Based on your level of risk acceptance, your adversary and the consequences, you need to choose the right technology and configure it correctly. This course will help guide you through that process. Protect what matters most. You'll know if it worked if you don't get a knock at the door. Based on the way you write, your spelling, grammar, punctuation, and general writing style can be used to identify you. This is called stylometry. which is a statistical analysis of variations in literary style between one writer or genre and another. Research suggests if someone has a sample of around, say, 5,000 to 6,500 words of text you have written, they can confirm within about 80% accuracy what other text you might have written. This means if you have an alias, it could be potentially linked to your real identity if you write in the same style. And English is also easier to analyse at the moment because more tools are available to do it and more research has been put into English. Let me give you some examples of some available tools that you could potentially play with. So there's JSAN, which is an open source writing style analysis and anonymizing framework. This consists of two parts. You've got the JS Stylo tool, which is the authorship attribution framework. So as the name suggests, it helps connect authors to writings. And then you've got Anonymouth, which is the authorship evasion framework, which is this one here. You also have things like Signature, which is another authorship attribution tool. And here's another anti-stylometry tool. I'm not sure how effective it is. It's pretty simple. I'm just going to paste in some writing here. This is Isaac Asimov's writing style. And let's see what we get from it. And there we see the input from iRobot. And there we can see the output. You can see it's capitalized the beginning of words and potentially done some other things that I can't see at the moment. So that's an anti-stylometry tool. Nation states are sure to be working on this capability, although I haven't heard much on it yet. Not that that means that nation states aren't experts at it already, or at least some may be experts at it already. There's an interesting video here if you want to understand more of the detail on stylometry. These guys are behind the JSAN anonymization framework. And if this is something that interests you, here's a report on the feasibility of internet scale authorship identification. Quite a scary prospect. If an attacker can combine stylometry with other OPSEC failures and profile leaks, attribution is going to be much easier for them. There are some mitigations that you can consider against the automated recognition tools. The first is use authorship recognition evasion tools. Next, consider using multiple sub-aliases because this could make attribution back to your real identity harder, potentially, maybe. Always the less you write is better. If you can, post text from other sources that you haven't written. If you can, try to impersonate other users' styles. You can include extra data in your posts and writings. For example, a list of objects or a poem. This makes automation of author attribution harder because you're intermixing different styles. If everyone uses LeetSpeak, this makes identification harder. LeetSpeak, if you're not aware, is converting your letters into things like this for Leet. So if we were to put in Isaac Asimov's writing into here and encode with basic Leet, it's going to look something like that. But obviously everybody has to be using Leet among the people that you're trying to hide within, otherwise you'll stand out because you're using LeetSpeak. Anonymous programmers can be identified by analyzing coding style. So if you're writing code, consider this. And this here is a link to the hidden wiki, which provides more information on anonymous writing styles. For those whose adversary might be a law enforcement agency or officer or nation state, as mentioned in the OPSEC rules, you should plan for the knock and getting arrested, interrogated, and even tortured if that's the sort of regime that you are living under. You must have plans and defenses in advance for the knock. Examples could be you might have your laptop with no battery in it and a kill switch to power it off because you know that this will prevent decryption by someone trying to extract the decryption key from memory. You might elect to have your private key and secret data stored in an encrypted SD card that can be snapped easily. You might have a planned escape route. There are many potential defenses you could employ. Make your knock plan as you go through the course if you have this level of need. Always remain calm and controlled, but act as if anxious, scared, and confused if you are not already. This will work in your favour. If your country has a legal system you can somewhat rely on, then have a solicitor ready to call who can deal with the situation. Your money may get seized, so it would be better to have prepaid your solicitor in advance. How much to prepay them depends on the activities you're involved in. You should know based on the nation that you're in. Have covert pre-arranged signals to others who need to know of your arrest or simply that you've been visited if you need them. In English-speaking nations, saying no comment to all questions is often advantageous, but this really depends on your situation and where you are. Inference could be drawn from your silence, which is why you need to have planned for this situation. Have a solicitor, know your rights and your best strategy in advance. So do research in advance so you know your rights. And don't fall for interrogation techniques where you are lulled into a false sense of security or where they play to your ego. They are not going to try to help you no matter what they say. Their job is to get a conviction. Forget about trust and justice. Your interrogator will only be interested in a conviction. They never have your best interests at heart no matter what they say. They have their own agendas and it is usually simply to get a conviction. In the West, they need evidence and solid evidence to charge you with any crime. In other repressive nations, evidence may be irrelevant, as you will probably know if you live in one. If that is the case for you, then you need to understand in advance how the system works so you can work that system. For those in Western countries, activist websites are often a good place for general legal advice. Here's an example here for a UK activist site, and there'll be the equivalent in the US, Australia and everywhere else. As a lot of the audience will be from the US, in the US often the substantive standard used is totality of circumstances. A totality of circumstances standard suggests that there is no single deciding factor, that one must consider all facts, the context, and conclude from the whole picture whether there is a probable cause or whether an alleged detention is really a detention, or whether a citizen acted under colour of law. That means the more failures of OPSEC, a more clearer picture you paint of your behaviour. When interviewed, make careful note of who they don't want information about if you have any co-conspirators. Co-conspirators could be working with your adversary. If they don't ask about that co-conspirator, it could be because they're working with your adversary. Polygraph testing. There is no scientific basis for polygraph testing. It's entirely dependent on your ignorance and fear. Educate yourself on it if asked to do one. A good book to read on this, it's actually a PDF you can just simply download, is called The Lie Behind the Lie Detector. In this, it'll show you the trickery on which the polygraph testing depends, and you can learn how to make sure you pass the polygraph test. And there's also this website as well on anti-polygraph. And they also have plenty of videos on YouTube. In countries with more repressive regimes, all bets are off, I'm afraid, as I have no idea as to how exactly they might deal with you, but you have to understand the system so you can work that system, if indeed that is at all possible. I would recommend learning about interrogation and counter-interrogation techniques. That will always help a lot. There are books you can buy, but do your own research, plan for the worst, hope for the best. Time to look at some interesting case studies in OPSEC failures. The main thing you'll find is that these failures are indeed basic. And you'll observe that if you just get basic OPSEC right, as I have detailed here, you will be an advanced opponent to your adversary who relies on basic OPSEC failures and easy targets. None of the criminal actions in these case studies I condone at all. They are here to demonstrate how OPSEC failures result in a breakdown of your security, privacy, and anonymity, which illustrates the point of how important OPSEC is. The first case study is LulzSec. Hector Monsegur, known as Sabu, normally connected to the LulzSec IRC channel via Tor. The FBI was monitoring the channel. On one occasion, he logged in using his real IP address, and that was it, game over. After being caught, he started to collaborate. One mistake was all it took. Jeremy Hammond, another LulzSec member, and Hector spoke with each other on IRC. Hammond casually let slip he was on probation, where he had been arrested, and other groups he was involved with. This narrowed him down to a small number of possible suspects, allowing the FBI to get a court order to monitor his internet access. This is classic profiling. Hammond used Tor, which wasn't de-anonymized by the FBI because it wasn't even necessary. Old-fashioned police work is the most effective method most often because of OPSEC failures. The FBI just correlated times the sup_GID was talking to Subu on IRC with when Hammond was at home using his computer. This is called a correlation attack. We talk more about counters to this later. OPSEC members talked about their operational activities. They used Tor, Apple laptops. They talked about which VPNs they used. One member used stolen credit cards to buy used car parts and got them shipped to his own house. These are all basic mistakes. They failed to apply many of my OPSEC rules. They didn't keep their mouth shut. They trusted people who were working for the FBI. They contaminated their identities. They allowed themselves to be profiled by giving away personal information and didn't protect their main assets. OPSEC is no more. The next case study is Silk Road. This is based on what has been published. How true it all is unknown. Ross William Ulbricht is the alleged Dread Pirate Roberts and operator of the original Silk Road. Silk Road had almost 1 million user accounts by July 2013 and is alleged to have processed 1.2 billion in transactions over 2 years. Probably because of the drugs being sold, the FBI became very interested in who was running it, in who was this Dread Pirate Roberts. The FBI started to look for references to Silk Road online, simply Google searches. An account called Altoid had posted jobs for Silk Road and related projects on the shroomery.org forums. An account named Altoid also made a post on bitcointalk.org about looking for an IT pro in the Bitcoin community and asked interested parties to contact Ross Ulbricht at gmail.com. This tied his real identity to Silk Road. Then the Ross Ulbricht Gmail account also posted on Stack Overflow asking for help with PHP code to connect to a Tor hidden service. The username was later then changed to something called Frosty, so this then connected him to hidden services. When he was caught by US Customs receiving 9 fake IDs, he allegedly told them anyone could have ordered them from Silk Road using Tor, and they hadn't even mentioned Silk Road or Tor to him. So this connected him to Silk Road again and to using Tor. The real IP address of the Silk Road servers was identified by the FBI. How this was done isn't known, but it could have been any number of ways, possibly by exploiting a vulnerability on the server and then forcing it to connect not using Tor. Once located, the FBI was able to get a copy of one of the servers. The server used an SSH public key that ended in Frosty at Frosty and had some of the same code posted on Stack Overflow. This is cryptographic attribution. The FBI located Ross at a library, observed him using the laptop at the same time as Dread Pirate Roberts was logged in, and grabbed him while his laptop was not locked, so disk encryption wasn't protecting the data. And then allegedly more evidence was found on his laptop, including a full journal of his activities. And this seems so stupid that it's hard to even believe that it's true. Personally, I question these alleged happenings. But based on this information, you can see a combination of basic OPSEC failures. He contaminated his real identity with Dread Pirate Roberts, so was doomed from the moment he did that. He didn't keep his mouth shut, and he blabbed about Silk Road and Tor without even being asked about them. He became far too interesting and a target to an extremely well-resourced adversary. He had no plans for the knock, leaving his laptop unencrypted when caught with evidence on it that should never have been there in the first instance. And the list of his failures goes on, if they are indeed true. Silk Road is no more. And the final case study is the Harvard bomb threat. A character called Aldo Kim wanted to get out of a final exam, so he's alleged to have made a bomb threat. And what we know about this case is using the university network, he connected to Tor, attempting to anonymize himself. He used a disposable email account from gorillamail.com to send the bomb threat. The email received contained as normal, an X originating IP header indicating the IP address of the sender, which in this case would show the Tor exit node's IP address. All Tor exit nodes are publicly known, except bridges, so it is possible to know the email was sent via Tor. Basic policing would look at motives of the person sending in the bomb threat. So who would have motives? Students, of course. So the first obvious step is to look through the logs of the university network, see if any students were accessing Tor at the same time. Aldo was identified as using Tor at the same time as the email was received. Again, this is called traffic correlation, and under questioning, he confessed. Pretty basic errors. Didn't keep his mouth shut, contaminated his identities by not maintaining compartmentalization. He could have simply gone off-site to a network that wasn't monitored. The people with good OPSEC you never hear about. There's no case studies on them. And finally, here's an interesting story of OPSEC failures of spies, if you want to check out that video. That's quite interesting.